So first off, good morning. Welcome to Pawsey's first online training for Introduction to Nimbus. We've broken it up, so we've only got an hour session today. We're going to take our time. It's not difficult. It's just can be a little daunting. There's a lot of new information there, but we'll take our time. The format for today is going to be that I will run through the episode or the material first, so you can concentrate on the Zoom screen, just watch what I'm doing, and then you'll be given an opportunity to run through the material by yourself. You'll get an opportunity to run through it and do it all yourself. I recommend you have basically a browser up so that you can see the instructional material, and you'll have another browser window up where you can actually apply that material. So if you can fit two browsers side by side on your window, I'd recommend you do that. But if you need to, switch between tabs, that's fine too. So then you do it at your own speed, and then we'll do the next episode and we'll go from there. Alrighty. The first thing I want to introduce to you is the concept of what the cloud actually is. The simplest way to say it, and what we've done previously, is to say the cloud is just someone else's computer. That gives you the base idea. I mean, you're using someone else's hardware they've set up and you contact it remotely. It's a little more complicated than that because there are a number of levels at which that cloud can provide services to you. So at a minimum, the Pawsey's Nimbus Cloud is infrastructure as a service. That is, we provide you with the computers, we provide you with the storage, and we provide you with the access, and then it's your responsibility to do with that compute and storage as you will. So you have essentially full slather on what you install, what you run, who you make it available to. So there's a lot of power there, but there's also a lot of responsibility. You need to essentially administer everything. And not only that, you need to be able to administer your project. You apply to Nimbus for an allocation, which will grant you a certain quota for the number of virtual machines, the amount of compute, the amount of memory, the amount of storage. So you'll have that sitting there in your project, and you are the administrator for that project. Okay, so it's not just that you have your laptop and the university set everything up for you, and you just run you write your Python code and it runs it on the data and you get your results. You have to actually create an instance, which I should mention that's another reason. These are some terms here that we use that are important. Instance is the term that's used for a virtual machine. In other words, one of our machines that you're using, a software created machine. OpenStack, which is the software program we use to run and manage all of these virtual machines, refers to it as an instance. So to prevent confusion, we will try to consistently refer to it as an instance. But if you hear instance, you can read virtual machine or VM. Okay. So if you create an instance, it's essentially just a raw operating system. So you have to install all the software you need. You have to be able to configure it if you want to use it as a web server. You have to be able to set that up. Okay, so that's infrastructure as a service. We essentially just give you access to this infrastructure. Obviously, some of the key strengths of this is that it's flexible. Okay, you can apply at any time. It's free. You can apply to have it for a week if you wish. If you've got a paper due and you need to do a lot of analysis and your local machine or the university isn't hacking it, and you just need a temporary increase in storage or compute, then you can apply to Nimbus, get it for a month, set it up, run it, and then you can be done with it. And you can just close off your allocation. You don't have to use it anymore. There are other benefits. Essentially, it's very flexible. You're working with virtual machines, so they're kind of a software. They're an abstract on our server. So as long as you maintain data integrity, if you use best practices, so you always back up your data to somewhere else. If you're always conscious of your software, so if you're using GitHub or something, so that you're not just writing one lot of code on your instance, and if you lose it, then you've lost 6 months worth of work. As long as you do that, then you can be very flexible with your Nimbus instances, because you can simply delete them if something goes wrong and replace them very quickly, which is what you'll learn to do today. Okay, so you'll see in the picture that here is the kind of the visual depiction of how the cloud works. You sit at your desk and you log in remotely using key pairs, and we'll discuss key pairs in a later episode, through the internet, and that gives you access to your project on Nimbus, which includes compute and storage. And the amount is based on the allocation you get when you first applied. That allocation isn't static. If you find that you don't have enough storage or you haven't got enough compute, then you can simply contact us and say, I need more storage for this reason. And as long as it's reasonable, then we will supply it for you. Okay, so the nature of cloud leads to kind of two roles, as I discussed. One is managing your project on Nimbus, so the allocation, the creation, deletion, and management of instances. And the other role is the more typical role of actually doing your work on the machine, installing software, writing code, moving data around. And those two roles are done in two different manners. You connect to your virtual machines, your instances, via a secure shell, so SSH. You manage your allocation and your project via a web interface, which is called the dashboard. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to log into Nimbus. I'm just going to click on this link. Okay, so this is the login to the dashboard for Nimbus. This is where you manage your project. And once again, I will run through this now. I'll log in, you can watch, and then once I've done this episode, you can actually do it yourself in a breakout room. So don't worry too much about, but the domain you use is Pawsey. The username is the username that you got from the Google Doc, in this case, for training. Obviously, it'll be the username you're supplied with when you get your allocation. So I am COU008, and my password is village gerbil. Okay, now it is case sensitive, right? So if it has a capital letter in the password, you need to do that. All right, so domain Pawsey, username for the training COU008, and I put in the correct password, and I can simply sign in. Okay, let me just get rid of my last pass. Okay, once you log in, you should be logged straight into the overview for your project. So all we're going to do is just kind of see some of the features and learn to navigate around this dashboard. So you've got a summary here for your entire project. How many instances, how many virtual machines you can have. We've used 0 out of 2, so this project is limited to 2 instances. How many virtual CPUs, how much memory in terms of RAM. Volumes refer to your, essentially, the equivalent of a hard drive, so storage volumes. And how much storage you have. For this, we've got a limit of 100 gig, okay? Now you'll notice for network, we've actually got some usage already. We've used 2 of 12 security groups, 7 of 20 security group rules, and we've actually got 1 network used as well. Let me just say. All right. Okay, let's see how we navigate around the actual dashboard. At the top here, you'll see that this lists this drop-down menu lists your project. At the moment, there's only 1 project because it's a training project. But if you have more than 1 project allocation on Nimbus, you can change between them from here. You'll also see this is who you are. Okay, you can sign in, sign out from here. You can do things like download the authentication if you want to actually use the OpenStack API. That's kind of more advanced. The main way you navigate around is over here on the left. Okay, so you can click various panels. Under compute, we've got overview, instances. So this will show you how many instances you currently have. Obviously, at the moment, we don't have any, so there's no information, but we'll be using this later. Key pairs. Key pairs are to do with authentication. We'll be doing that in the next episode. You will also have things like under network. You can do security groups. Security groups, once again, we'll discuss that. So you have 2 security groups by default. Good thing to know is don't be afraid of actually just playing with the dashboard. There isn't anything, as far as I know, that you can break so badly that we can't fix it, although I have been proved wrong before. So just take an opportunity to play around, have a look around, get familiar with where everything is. And what I'd like you to start thinking about while you go on the break of a bit of a play is, the question is, why, if we haven't actually done anything on our project, why has some of our allocation already been used in terms of security groups, rules, networks, ports? All right. Okay, jolly good. Anybody have an idea as to an answer for the question about why this already, you're already using some of your quota, despite the fact that you haven't actually created anything yet? So,
I guess I can't answer because I work for Pawsey.
No, you can't answer.
It's because you need to be able to communicate with your instance remotely. So that's why there's 1 network allocation and a couple of ports.
Yep. And you, as you saw, I mean, you'll see that there's security groups. If we go click on network and then click on security groups, you can see there's a default security group that's set up by our cloud admins by default, and that one shouldn't be changed. Okay, and that's essentially providing you with the minimum functionality so that when you create an instance, it actually works. And then we also discussed, remember that you've got SSH access. So they also create a default security group rule for that. Okay. So let's go on to our next episode. Okay. Now, authentication, what we're talking about here is how you control access to your instances once you've created them. Okay. Now, typically, we would use a username and a password for that. But a username and a password isn't particularly secure. And to give you an idea, every new IP address, so internet address, so each new address that we make available in Pawsey is scanned within a fraction of a second of it actually being made public, mostly by bots, sometimes by manual hackers, but within a fraction of a second of that IP being made available, it gets scanned. And if you've used a weak username and password for that instance, then it can be hacked, and then they can take control of the instance, and they can use it all for bit mining or whatever they want to use it for. Obviously, we would hopefully be able to notice that's being used, and we'd be able to destroy it, but it's not something that you want happening. So by default, we don't allow username and passwords for instances. By default, they're set up with what are called SSH keys, okay? Key pairs, if you like. And with SSH keys, you have two keys, hence key pairs. You have a public key, which you can think of as a username, and you have a private key, which you could think of as the password. The public key is actually stored on your instance. The private key you download and you keep on your local machine, and it should be treated as a password. That is, you should treat it with the utmost, with security utmost in your mind at all times. Don't share it. Don't transfer it anywhere. Don't put it on a Google Doc. Okay, and then what happens is when you try and log into your instance, the instance will say, okay, you need to have this username or this key. Do you have your private key? And then if you do, they talk to each other, and then you're allowed access. So the question for you is, does anyone know why key pairs are more secure than using a username and password? Luke's got his hand up.
Luke, you can go first.
Is it because you continually encrypt the communication back and forth?
Yes, but it's more the fact that you're not actually communicating your password. Okay, you don't type in your password, and that password is not sent to the machine. It just looks at your encrypted key and says, yes, this is the right one. So you're not actually transmitting it. Plus, there's the fact that a password might be, 8, 12 characters. The private key that you create by minimum is 2048 characters. So it's much harder to brute force. There's also the fact that you're not typing the key, the password in. So if someone's got a keyboard logger, installed some malware that would track the keys, they can't get the password from you. The flip side is that if you get your private key, because it's a file, if it's stolen or if you lose it, then at best your key pair becomes useless and you can't access your instance. At worst, someone else can then use your key pair to access all of your instances. Okay. So what we're going to do is actually generate a key pair, okay, from the Nimbus dashboard. And then we'll have that available whenever we create an instance, okay? So let's go to here. I'll log in again to the dashboard, full size 008 is my username. Pawsey is the domain name. My password is Village Gerbil. I log in. All right, then I go. I want to create a key pair. So under Compute, you'll see there's a tab Key Pairs. I click on that. That loads. You have no key pairs currently for this account. Okay, I come up here. These are my options. If you are already using key pairs, so for example, if you've been using them on AWS, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure, or Google, you can import those keys so that you don't have to keep creating new ones. Okay. We will be creating a key pair, so we go ahead, create key pair. We give it some kind of meaningful name. So I'm just going to call it training. We create. Okay, now it's created a key pair. So it's created a public key, which it will keep with the dashboard so that it's available to install or put onto any instances you make. The private key is now being downloaded to my machine, okay? And it's very important that you know where that private key is, because you need to be able to reference it when you're logging into your instance. So there are some places, we can talk about best practices is to put it in a hidden folder in your home directory called .ssh, because you're using SSH. But for training purposes, it doesn't really matter. You just need to know where it is. So I will go ahead and put it on my desktop. And I've saved it, and I should, technically speaking, I should probably write that down so that I know what it's called and where it is. But you'll see that we now have created a key pair. Okay? And we can use that to log into our instance when we create it. All good? All right. Well, we've only got one episode left. That's the one where we do the most, and that's actually creating an instance. So we've got about 17 minutes left, so that should be pretty good timing. So I will get on with that. Just share my screen again. All right. So once again, from within the Nimbus dashboard. Now, something to realize is that if you are on your dashboard and you leave it for a little while, you quite often get logged out. Okay, and then you just need to log back in again. All right, so we are going to create an instance. We've created a key pair, so we've got a way to access that instance. Now we just need to create an instance. So we'll go to the instances panel. You can see there's nothing there yet. Up on the right here is a button that perhaps confusingly says launch instance. It really means begin the process of launching an instance. Okay, and launching an instance is all about just configuring how you want your virtual machine to appear. Right? Once you press on the launch instance button, you'll see this launch instance window. Okay, and our first one, the first panel that we're dealing with, or the first option, if you like, is details. So we're going to give the instance a name. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but we recommend that you try and name it something relevant to what it's the purpose is actually serving. So I'm going to put training. You can give a description if you like. First training instance, but you're not required to. You don't need to change availability zone or count. Okay. Now, you'll also see on the right here that you've got a little quota So you can see that you're not going over quota. Basically, we're allowed 2 instances. We're about to add our first. To actually navigate through the launch instance window, once we've completed that panel, we can select next. You can also select back when we're not at the last page, but you can also go directly to panels simply by clicking on them. So if if you're all the way through or almost all the way through and you wanted to think, oh, I wanted to change that, you can simply go and select the panel. Okay. For the moment, we'll just use the next button. So I've got my instance name, I give it a description, I'm happy with that, I press next. I'm now through to my instance source, okay? So instance source is referring to the operating system that we want to install in our instance, okay? They're all Linux-based, okay? So we've got CentOS, I'm not sure who put Goat on, ignore that, that's the cloud team going crazy. And we've got Ubuntu, we've got version 18.04 and 20, okay? We're going to select how we want the instance to boot up. In this case, we're going to choose image. But if you have created, for example, when we were talking about images, if you've created a snapshot, just like you do with Time Machine on Macs or the Windows does a backup, you could select to actually start an instance from a snapshot of another instance. You can also do it from a particular volume, in other words, a volume like a hard drive. So you might have a bootable volume from a previous project or instance, okay? But for the moment, we're going to select image. We want create new volume, yes. The one below it, delete volume on instance delete. We recommend you do yes, okay? And I'll tell you why, because if you're deleting instances, which you will be, that's kind of the strength of cloud, being able to create and delete instances as you will. The root volume, if you don't delete it, will hang around and it'll start taking up quota on your project, okay? And if, as I said earlier, if you've made sure that all your data is backed up and you've got everything ready, all your software is set up, then you don't need to keep your root volume. Okay? So we recommend you say yes to delete volume on instance delete, certainly for the beginning. There may be instances where you do want to change that, and you can change that as you like. Okay. Volume size. Now, you used to have to just select a volume size that was sufficient to incorporate the operating system that we're going to select, but I believe that's changed. So I'm going to test it. I'm going to select Ubuntu 18.04. You'll see Pawsey in the name. That just means that we've changed that public image a little so it better suits Nimbus. And to select it, I'm going to press the up arrow on the right, and that has selected it. And yes, you see, it's automatically chosen a volume size, in other words, a root volume size, a minimum, that allows us for this operating system. Okay, so all we've done, image source, boot source is image, create new volume, delete volume on instance delete, and we've chosen Ubuntu 18.04 Pawsey. And that's it. So why is, oh, I see. I then select next. Now, flavor. Flavor is how OpenStack refers to the configuration for your instance, i.e. Number of CPUs, the amount of RAM, the total disk size. Now you'll see a number of options, okay? M2 small, M3, blah, blah, blah. Anything with M2 in front of it, okay, you should not select. This is actually a holdover from our transition to the new Nimbus system. okay? And these are only here for people that are migrating from the old system to the new system. If you select an M2 flavor, okay, and go through to the end and try launch instance, it will not work. It'll give you an error, something like host not available, okay? So the ones that we want to select have N3, okay? So you could, at this stage, you could select an N3, and you'll see the actual title, 1C4R, means 1 CPU and 4 gig of RAM. You'll see the other one here, N3, 2C8R, okay? Because these are only training accounts and we've got a very small quota, you can't select any of these bigger flavors. So I'm just going to go ahead and select N3 1C4R. Press the up arrow, it selects it. I'm ready to go on to the next one. Network. So you automatically have, as you see, 2 networks set up for you. One that's specific for your account, in this case it's COU 008, and one that says public external. We're going to select public external because it automatically gives you a public IP address. You will mostly use this other network as an internal network. You can allocate a floating IP, an IP address to that network, but you would mostly use it if, for example, you were setting up a cluster and you wanted all of your instances in the cluster to be able to communicate to each other. You would then use that network. So it's a more advanced topic, okay? But we're just going to select public external because that automatically gives us access. Press next. We're not going to do anything with network ports, okay? So we can completely skip that. We get on to security groups. Now, security groups, if you like, they're just the firewall, for instance, if you want to think of it like that, okay? And by default, the firewall is up for virtually everything. So no communication is pretty much allowed out of the instance. Well, we're going to need SSH access in order to be able to talk to our instance. If you create the instance and you haven't opened the firewall for SSH, you won't be able to talk to it. Okay? So we're going to select the SSH security group, and we're done with that. Next is our key pair. We created our training key pair. Okay. So it's actually selected it, since we only have one. And that is the end. Okay, that's all we'd have to actually do. We don't need to worry about configuration, server groups, metadata, scheduler hints, etc. All more advanced stuff. So we've done all that. Now I can actually click on launch instance. So we'll give that a shot, see if I've done everything correctly. Okay, it says one instance launched. You'll see that it's building. Okay. It has an IP address associated, 146.118.67.165. Okay, you need to write that IP address down on a piece of paper, okay? Because that is what you use. That's the address you need to put in when we're contacting via SSH. You can always come back to your dashboard and find it, but I recommend you write it down so you've got it easily available. And that's it. But today was all about managing your project and doing the most common thing, which is creating an instance. So it's not in the instructions, but I might as well do it anyway. I'm going to share the screen. We've got a couple of minutes. What I would like you to do, if you feel so inclined, is to actually run through all this again. Okay, you've got room for 2 instances in your quota. You've got access for this for at least another 48 hours. So, I mean, you can do it as many times as you like. Log in. You know, you could create new key pairs if you want. You can create and delete a snapshot, an instance. So for example, I might delete this instance. Okay, so from my drop-down menu for this instance, I can select a number of options, including delete instance. Okay, so I can also reboot it. I can shut it off. But what I'm going to do is delete it. Okay, scheduled for deletion, done. So now I can go through and create another 2 instances if I wish. Okay. And that, unless I'm mistaken, is everything for today.